good afternoon to everyone. We are so glad to have each and every one of you here with us. Welcome to Student-Affirming Education, the student-affirming education needed for our children and our nation's future, from the Voices of Honest Education Fellowship. My name is Natasha Wilkins, and I am the Educator Engagement Coordinator for the Education Civil Rights Alliance, convened by the National Center for Youth Law, and I will be your moderator for our time together. So today we have a great team of educators, parent voice, and student voice lined up for our conversation. And I am personally very excited to hear from this power-packed house all this information that will help us better understand why we need to encourage policymakers to support curriculum that ensures every student in our nation feels seen, heard, and valued. So today's conversation is particularly timely, as in several states where anti-honest educational gag orders were passed into law, educators are now navigating this new school year, trying to understand how to support every child while also avoiding topics such as diversity, or figuring out how to answer fully age-appropriate questions from their students about current events in our nation without losing their jobs, or without losing their jobs for talking about something that could be considered divisive or something that could be seen as causing any of their diverse students to feel guilt or anguish. And so Voices for Honest Education believes that our nation's public education system should be shaped to serve each and every child. And there is no shortage of research that shows that students need a student-centered, student-affirming education to succeed. And we know that when the children of our nation succeed, we all succeed with them. So now let's meet the voices that will be championing honest education this evening. So I'm going to invite all of our panelists to join me on screen. It is so good to see each and every one of you. So we are going to take some time to let all of these panelists introduce themselves, and we are going to start with Monica Washington.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Monica Washington. I am the 2014 Texas State Teacher of the Year. Glad to be here.
Hi, y'all. I'm Chris Dier, the 2020 Louisiana Teacher of the Year. So happy to be here.
Hey everyone, I am Tracy Nance. I am the 2020 and 2021 Georgia Teacher of the Year. Very excited to share all that we've been learning.
How's everybody doing? My name is Gerardo Munoz. I am the 2021 Colorado Teacher of the Year. It's really great to see so many people in attendance today.
Hi everyone, Takeru Nagayoshi here. Also go by TK. I'm the 2020 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. Also great to see some familiar names in the attendees.
And I'm also going to invite our parent and student voice. So Jen, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, thanks. I'm so glad to be with you all. My name's Jennifer Cortez, and I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit in Williamson County, Tennessee, and we advocate for students of color in our local schools.
And Alex.
Hello, I am Alex Ames. I am a student attending school in Georgia. My parents are educators. I use any pronouns. I'm with the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition, and I'm excited to be here.
And thank you so much to all of our speakers who will be sharing with us today. You all can go back off screen for a second, and I'm going to invite Scott Meltzer, the Executive Director of the National Network for State Teachers of the Year, to share a little bit with us.
Thank you, Natasha. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Scott Meltzer. As a first-generation college graduate and an AmeriCorps alum, it's an honor and a joy to serve as the President and CEO of the National Network of State Teachers of the Year, or NSTOY for short. A little bit of background on NSTOY. We're a national network of state teachers of the year and finalists who are committed to the teaching profession and student achievement by focusing on the practices and policies in public education. We are a diverse network of educators who teach in communities in every state, representing every subject area. And from school board members to US Congress people, our members lead in elected, appointed, and volunteer leadership positions across the country. We have a mission to continue raising the collective incredible voices of teachers everywhere and to support policies and practices that advance teacher leadership, educator effectiveness, and great teaching and learning for all students, all through the lens of equity. And this is why we partnered with the National Center for Youth Law to design and launch the Voices for Honest Education Fellowship that you'll learn about today. Led by 5 state teachers of the year across the country, the Voices for Honest Education Fellows aim to educate and inspire action by teachers, parents, taxpayers, and policymakers for an honest public education reflective of our diverse students. This webinar and report release are only the beginning for this fellowship. Moving forward, we plan to have national fellows such as those that you'll meet today, as well as state-focused fellows based on the selection process, training, goals, and programming that we have designed. If a state-based Voices for Honest Education Fellowship with NSTROY members is interesting to you, let's talk and make it happen. Please feel free to reach out to Natasha and I to talk more. I'm going to turn it back over to the incredible Natasha to share more about our fellowship as well as our webinar format for this afternoon. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and I will add to what Scott said. The National Center for Youth Law is extremely excited for this partnership with the National Network of State Teachers of the Year. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Center for Youth Law, the mission of the National Center for Youth Law is to dismantle structural inequities, amplify youth power, and build policies, practices, and culture in support of young people. And for over 50 years, we have centered youth in impact litigation, policy advocacy, communications, collaboration, and research that fundamentally transforms our nation's approach to education, health, immigration, foster care, and youth justice. This partnership with the National Network for State Teachers of the Year is extremely exciting, as we believe that educational equity cannot be achieved without the voices of parents, students, and very importantly, educators who are on the front line of this work daily and who are often the first to feel and see the impact of education policy and what it means for kids. Through our educator engagement work, we work with educators like the Voices for Honest Education team to support and train educators in how to ensure their voices are heard and elevated in the education policy space. So a big thank you to each of our speakers for your boldness in elevating your voices today. Before we get more into the conversation around the report and what we found, we're going to go over a few housekeeping items for today's webinar. So one, we will have a question and answer session at the end of the event. So at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A box. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in there and we will answer those questions at the end of the evening. You can also access the full report. We will share that website before the evening is over, so don't leave before we're finished, and we will make sure that everyone gets access to the full report, which will be available or is available on NSTOY's website. And finally, if you hear something you like, you can use the hashtag Voices for Honest Ed. That's voices, the number 4, Honest Ed, ED, and you can amplify it on social media. We want to make sure that everyone is engaged and everyone is sharing all of the great nuggets of wisdom that I am super excited to hear this evening. And so with that, we're going to dive into the content now. I am going to invite Monica and Gerardo to join me back on screen. And Monica and Gerardo, can you all share a little bit with everyone? What was the methodology and process for how this report was put together? You all are educators and now you're researchers. Tell us about that.
Thank you so much, Natasha. So I'm happy to share a little bit about our why. I know Natasha and Scott dove into that a little bit, but I really want to highlight some of the things that we were thinking as we began to put this together. So we put it together because we know children all over the country deserve to learn in classrooms in which they are encouraged to use their voices, to ask questions, to reflect on accurate history, and to learn from the perspectives of others. Educational gag orders and book bans harm students because they further reduce representation of diverse populations in curricula, and they threaten students' ability to think critically. We wanted to create a report that speaks to the need for all children to have access to honest education. So I want to share a little bit about our how, like how do we put this whole thing together? We're super proud of it and can't wait to share it with you. So we began the research just thinking about our own experiences. We dove into what have we experienced in the classroom? What conversations have we had with our own students? And as award-winning educators, we're aware that any accolade that we've ever gotten doesn't really stem from content at all, but it stems from our ability to engage students in affirming learning environments. So we wanted to gather the perspectives of our peers around the country, and we did that. We wanted to look for similar challenges, similar successes, and after we did that, we wanted to look into the current data. What's out there that's new right now that really speaks to these issues that we are discussing in this report. So we used NAEP, for academic performance. We looked to the National Center for Education Statistics to really capture the demographics right now around the country. And thank you to the NEA for their recent white paper that's called The Very Foundation of Good Citizenship. We dove into that because they really did a great job of capturing student experiences right now, and also teacher experiences. And so before I turn it over to my colleague, I wanted to quickly share why this is personal to me. So as an American literature teacher, I have always felt that the best way to teach English is to situate it within a historical context. But what I always found is that as I tried to teach whatever we were reading, often we didn't have what we needed to support that in the history. And so I found myself often looking for ways to fill in what was missing perspectives, missing viewpoints. And so I had to pull those things together for my students so that I would give them a more complete picture of literature and of history. So that allowed my students to better connect to what we were studying, because then they had a better experience with connecting with perspectives around them. And so as I think about this, I don't want other teachers to have to do the work that I had to do, which is pulling from all different kinds of places to create that more complete history, that more complete literature. And so that's what we're diving into in this report. So with that, I want to kick it to my good friend Gerardo, who's going to talk to you about the importance of engaging stakeholders in this report, and also the importance of engaging students in this report. So with that, I turn it over to my friend Gerardo.
Thank you, Monica. It's great to see all these names out here, seeing some familiar faces. Absolutely. Stakeholder engagement has been important to this work since day one. We know that in order to build a better democracy and to strengthen ideas of freedom and liberation for marginalized communities in our nation, we need all voices at the table. Parents have hopes and dreams for their students. They want their students to be able to succeed, to develop life skills so that they can have possibilities at a comfortable life in the future. Students are very concerned about their future at this point, hoping that they can find ways to develop the skills that they need to move into a successful adult life. And of course, teachers, who are the glue of a lot of our communities, give a way to do this. We can't do this stuff in isolation. It's not possible. We need to bring people to the table, and we need to be able to hear the voices and work collaboratively to do this. This has been the work over the last couple of months, and it will be reflected in the report. In a minute, I'm going to talk about student voice, but one thing I want to share is my own testimonial about the power of teaching honest education. In my history classroom, honest education activated my students' engagement, as well as their commitment to self-improvement and life skills. They developed self-confidence and skills needed to pass other classes, to improve their attendance, and to learn to cooperate with others. I began my career in a space where students had fallen behind in their credits and were becoming very frustrated. And so having an authentic, honest education really gave them ways to engage and to reintegrate into their school environments. These skills are deeply important for future opportunities and success. Honest teaching created a sense of belonging and agency. Not only did they connect with this nation's history, they improved their reading, writing, and speaking skills. They went from being passive and disconnected students to engaged and excited learners. And these are the stories we hear all over the country when students are able to access honest education through history. They thrive and they have a great time. So with that, student voice is extremely important to this. These are the stakeholders that have so much to say and share with us about what we are doing. I would like to welcome from the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition, Alex Ames.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Alex. How are you?
I am good. I am in between classes. I'm having a great day.
All right. Well, let's get this interview done, right? So I have a few questions I want to ask you in terms of your work representing youth and being a part of this generation whose voices are becoming louder and louder. Why is it important that students be engaged as valued partners in the work around supporting and protecting curriculum that upholds an honest education?
Yeah, so moving throughout our history, young people today are the most diverse class, the most diverse demographic that we've had of all our generations. And as such, we are very, very valuable stakeholders. The experiences that young people have in schools paired with the experiences of parents and educators have a lot to provide when we're shaping what our children need, what they're living through, like a deadly pandemic or a teacher shortage. So young people are stakeholders, same as their peers who are older than them and have the right to vote, even when students are too young to do something like that. And when we're able to incorporate the lived experiences of young people into the histories that they're learning, the books that they're reading, those kinds of things, we're able to have a public education that better equips them to serve as future leaders and voters in our, society. These are the folks who are going to be our engineers. They're going to be our elected officials. They're going to be all sorts of powerful, powerful people, but only if they have the tools they need to succeed and work with others, to have agreements and friendships across identity lines. And for us in Georgia and for many students across the country, that's normal. You look to your left, you look to your right, and there's folks from all across the world with all different faiths and genders. And that's normal, and that is something to be celebrated. And these laws are explicitly an attack on that freedom of identity and of belonging.
Thank you so much for that, Alex. That's so critical that we reflect the reality that's around students every day. Can you share a little bit about the work that you and other students in Georgia have been doing through the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition?
Absolutely. So I am an organizer with them and a full-time student, as are all of our students. And there are hundreds of us organizing every single day and every week, and thousands more, in our neighborhoods and our networks. And we really did get started because we saw these bills coming down at our school board level, targeting pronouns, targeting Black young people and their ancestors and their histories. And we knew that this was an attack not just on our education, but the education of our younger siblings to come and of the democracy that we are supposed to inherit. So we started organizing, going to school boards and speaking our truth, and going to the state capitol and demanding not just racial justice in curriculum, but also in the rights we hold as folks who should be allowed to have public comment, or in the funding our schools are owed that we've been denied for my entire lifetime, going to these underfunded schools and then erasing the history that brought us to that point. So I think what's very cool about it is that all of this work is being done by young people in coalition with folks of all generations. And we're winning. We're winning massive victories in terms of school funding and stopping censorship. And though there is still, that faction that would want to take all of that away, we're finding that when you knock on the doors of your parents and your peers, ordinary voters aren't thinking about, the threat of trans kids playing soccer. They're thinking about Uvalde, and they're thinking about their child's ability to succeed from a mental health perspective and an academic perspective. And this curriculum is absolutely vital to making that possible.
Thank you, Alex. And that's so true. The data supports this type of teaching. To the opposition that you spoke about, the state of Georgia passed House Bill 1084. This is the state's divisive concepts bill. Can you share your concern and that of your peers about this bill and what it means to the students of Georgia?
Yeah, so these past 2 weekends alone, we convened over 150 educators, counselors, administrators, and students to talk about the fact that these political gag orders are a serious attack on our rights as students in the school system. That, Black students are sitting in schools named after Confederate generals in Georgia, and they are looking around at their textbooks and their teacher is saying, sorry, we just can't learn about this year because of these confusing bills. That's what they're meant to do. They're meant to cause educators to self-censor because educators are under attack as professionals and because you are meant to feel fearful of teaching something that should not be banned. The bill itself contradicts. In one part, it says you can teach this stuff, and in another, it says that you can't. So, as we approach things like litigation to be able to prove that these do have negative impacts on our students and be able to prove that in a court, to overturn that law, we also want to build up the resilience of our communities to be able to look at a bill like that and say, right there in that bill, it says nothing here should stop you from teaching about Reconstruction, slavery, segregation, and the civil rights movement. And as such, I'm going to continue to teach diverse history. I'm going to continue to teach the truth. And I am going to continue to maintain the rights I am owed as an American citizen and someone in a public school system. So building up that resilience, our ability to stand against bigotry and censorship is absolutely vital for the years to come and for the children in schools right now who we owe that to.
Such powerful words, Alex, and echoed so much across the country. You know, those of us who have been in education for a long time, we're state teachers of the year. We've had an opportunity to connect with teachers in other states. This work can get really frustrating and really difficult, and sometimes it can feel a little bit discouraging. How have you and other student activists, not only in Georgia, but across the country, how do y'all keep this energy? How do you find the energy to continue to fight this fight?
Yeah, for sure. This is my favorite question to answer because we stay in it because we're winning. We are winning a whole lot. And I don't know if folks have had the chance to look around and take a moment to celebrate what, building community, building power actually results in. But it results in victory. In Forsyth County, Georgia, one of 181 school districts, we have a violent history of white supremacy and specifically anti-Blackness in this community. And this was the one district in the state of Georgia that decided to ban books. They banned them about 1 year ago, and every single month our students would go to that school board meeting and they would demand educators, parents, come sit alongside us and keep us safe from the extremists in that room who would bring guns, who would bring their threats. And we won. We defeated that book ban. And that is phenomenal. That is the type of story we need to hear more about because it's happening all across the country. We were faced with this Black History ban, which initially would have banned much more curriculum, much more discussion of race and racial injustice. It would have stolen $1.7 billion of public taxes away from public schools because they chose to teach the truth about race and ethnicity, and it would have impeded censorship onto 300,000 students in higher education in Georgia as well. And we stopped all three of those components for students like us who went to school with, sewage on the ground and mold on the walls. Like, saving that money and getting the best public education budget of my lifetime was phenomenal. So I stay in it because together we are winning. We're going to continue to win. And I don't know, we see a brighter future being built around us all the time. It's a wonderful thing.
It really is. Folks, this is Alex Ames from the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition.
Thanks so much, Gerardo. And thanks so much, Alex. Just echoing what we heard there. We are moving forward in ways that are beneficial for the students in our nation. This report also shows, we're going to hear in a second from some of our other awesome educators, just how much or how important it is that we continue to stand firm, we continue to advocate for a student-affirming education. So thanks, Alex, and thanks, Gerardo. I'm going to invite Tracy, TK, and Chris to join me on screen to dive a little more into what the data says. We heard Alex there giving a lot of data. Can you all elaborate more? What did you find when you were doing the research for this report? What does the data tell us about what our students need and what should be happening in our nation's schools?
Absolutely. Thank you, Natasha, and to Gerardo and Alex. I do not know how I can follow up such passion from a student, but I can tell you her voice and the work that she's doing, the type of thinking and collaboration that she's doing with students across our state and country. That's the reason why this is so important. Our kids are absolutely our future. I am Tracy, the 2020 and 2021 Georgia Teacher of the Year, and I'm excited to share with you some of our key findings in this report. I really wanted to be a part of this report and advocacy because I've seen firsthand the value of a student-affirming education. First, in Chicago Public Schools, where I started teaching in a school that was 100% African-American, and then in Atlanta Public Schools, where my students' background varied widely across race, across socioeconomic class, religion, and family structure. Regardless of who's in your class, student-affirming practices work. So what are they? Next, please. Monica told you that we engage with educators across the country and we wanted to see what their experiences were. And to be sure, good teachers have known the value of this type of teaching for a really long time. because you can't help but not to when you get to know the kids that are in front of you with all of their wonderful potential, all of their unique identities. You can't help but teach in this way. We found that it's just what you do because it makes kids valued and engages them in real world learning and problem solving. So according to our teachers, a student-affirming education welcomes their identities, every aspect of it. It's culturally responsive and inclusive. It teaches history, honestly, yes, even the ugly parts, and it builds students' capacity to think critically and collaborate with others. Next, the benefits of a student-affirming education were very, very clear in our review of their research. We poured through countless articles and studies, and we found that they contribute to numerous positive outcomes. They contributed to increasing student attendance, GPA, state testing results, soft skills such as critical thinking and communication, behavior, engagement, and this is really important, student self-perception as capable students. Can I do this? Can I become the individual who I want to become when I grow up? We want all kids to see the many possibilities for their life, and a student-affirming education is a big part of that. Next, there were 2 studies done on ethnic courses in Tucson and San Francisco. This is just one example of a study that really uplifts the positive impacts of this type of teaching. These longitudinal studies found that across the board, regardless of the student's cultural, racial, socioeconomic background, that it improved the students' attendance by 21 points. It increased their GPA or 21 percentage points, and credits earned were increased by 23. That is so affirming and such a positive outlook for the power of this type of teaching. Next. What's more, we have found that the NAEP's most recent results absolutely demand that we look at this type of teaching in our classrooms. Unfortunately, we found that our fears about the pandemic and that learning loss and kids being out of the building, all of those fears were confirmed. And importantly, we saw that those disparities between white students and historically marginalized students increased double-fold. For example, Black students' math scores fell 13 points, while white students' math scores fell approximately 5 points. The disparities between students of these subgroups are increasing at an astronomical rate. And fortunately, there are a lot of educators and districts that have begun working towards promoting more cultural understanding, promoting inclusiveness. Next slide, please. And this is really important because not only do our kids need this in their academic, results, but it is what prospective employers and college admission offices report that they want. Most lacking, but most needed are those soft skills like critical thinking, problem solving, and communication. Next, please. Even more, I'm just going to keep piling on the reasons. Our diversity has changed at an extreme rate over the last 4 decades. Starting in 1980, there was a drastic shift. And throughout that time, it's only continued to change. Currently, our student population is approximately 45% white, with other groups making up what I've come to love, a term called the global majority, right? So this is what our classrooms look like today. Next. So since that time, a lot of educators and researchers, they jumped on studying this. They jumped on implementing ways to increase multicultural awareness for our students. We had Gloria Ladson-Billings, who coined the term culturally relevant pedagogy. And following her, we had Dr. Rudine Sims talk about the value of multicultural texts in the classroom. Texts that serve as mirrors, reflecting your own lived experiences, but also as windows. And kids deserve to see both of those things. Unfortunately, though, we've actually found that those diversity has not kept up with diversity of materials has not kept up with that changing student population. While there are many states working towards this, for example, in 2018, the state of New York actually implemented a culturally relevant teaching framework for educators to use. But by 2020, the landscape became ripe for some pushback. Following the COVID-19 pandemic and racial unrest that was created by murders of unarmed Black men, the landscape was ready. We saw some districts push even more towards promoting a cultural understanding. And unfortunately, we saw some politicians decide to use this as a way to put their own politics over the well-being of kids. I was actually serving on the Georgia School Board as an ex officio member during the introduction of Georgia's 1084, House Bill 1084, their divisive concepts bill. And at the time, this was in June of 2021, they said, it's just a belief. It's not a law, Tracy. I don't know why you're so upset about this. We just believe these things. It was little over a year later that belief became codified law. And as Alex described to you earlier, educators in Georgia, students in Georgia, and in many other states across our country are dealing with the same thing. It is shocking because of how much progress has been made, and it absolutely deserves our attention. I'm going to kick it over to Chris Dier, our 2020 Louisiana Teacher of the Year, to share more with you about these gag orders and their impact.
Thanks so much for highlighting that research, Tracy. I'm Chris Dier, the 2020 Louisiana Teacher of the Year. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk more about our research. In our research, we tracked the rise and trend of anti-honest education policies. In 2021, multiple states sought to silence stories of historically marginalized perspectives. Since 2021, 42 states have taken measures that would restrict teaching about race, gender, or other divisive concepts. 15 states enacted laws prohibiting the teaching of these concepts, while other states took administrative actions that limit honest education. Additionally, some districts have adopted gag orders and book bans that reduce representation and harm student development. These educational orders were strategically calculated for political gain, regardless of material harm. Next slide, please. We also found that these gag orders actually punish educators who work to provide affirmance spaces. For example, an Oklahoma teacher resigned after the district put her on administrative leave for sharing with her kids a QR code for digital access to banned books. A Tennessee teacher was fired after assigning students a Ta-Nehisi Coates essay. A Florida teacher was fired after displaying a Black Lives Matter banner in her classroom. And these are only a small sampling of a very disturbing trend of actions against educators. And these attacks create additional challenges for teachers and push many out of the profession. Next slide, please. Our research also highlights how teacher recruitment and retention challenges significantly hurt our children's education and contribute to higher rates of teacher burnout and stress. An estimated 300,000 educators and staff have left the profession since 2020. 53% of public schools are understaffed entering this school year. 55% of educators stated in 2022 that they are likely to leave the profession or retire from education soon. Moreover, an even higher percentage of Black and Hispanic Latino teachers stated they are more likely to leave the profession early. This increase in lack of diversity exacerbates existing equity concerns for all students. And due to these concerns, 62% of parents state that they would not want their child to pursue a career in teaching, an all-time high. Next slide, please. Despite these hardships, we further highlight the great strides made in opposing anti-honest legislation and adopting student-affirming legislation. As Alex said, we are gaining victories across the nation. Anti-honest education bills failed to pass in at least 23 states. Governors from both Kansas and Wisconsin vetoed harmful educational legislation. And in Louisiana, students, teachers, and families came together to stop an anti-honest education bill and later an anti-trans bill. And I see some of those teachers in the Zoom right now. In recent years, 11 of 20 non-repealed policies that address LGBTQ plus students were affirmed, while 19 states adopted laws requiring multicultural education. For example, California became the first state to make an ethnic studies course a high school graduation requirement. In Louisiana, we fought to allow African American history to fulfill credit requirements for graduation. These policies expand student knowledge about the experiences and vast contributions of Americans from all backgrounds. And as a history teacher, I witnessed firsthand the positive impact of teaching history to our kids. Every day, I am blessed with the fortunate job to witness kids thrive in real time when their identities are affirmed via the content I am fortunate and allowed to teach. And that brings me joy and hope. And national polls show that most Americans want children to have a student-affirming education. And as nationally acclaimed educators, we have the platform to advocate for policies that uplift educator diversity and ensure students have a supportive, affirming environment. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my friend TK to discuss more of our research.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. And riding on that coattail of positivity, right? We want to talk a little bit about parent polling data. Hi, everyone, Takeru TK over here, 2020 Massachusetts Teacher of the Year. My section is going to focus on polling data, particularly those that capture the parent perspective. Now, if you've heard a lot of the misinformation on anti-honest education groups, you might get this impression that parents don't want topics like race or the full history of our country being taught in our schools. But according to recent polling data, honest and inclusive education is overwhelmingly supported by parents and caregivers, and that's regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, and also regardless of their political party. So you're seeing in this slide right now, right? But in a nutshell, the headlines are the majority of parents are against educational gag orders. They're against book bans. They support teaching the full history on topics like race and identity. They trust their local teachers, and they overwhelmingly oppose the politicization of education. So we're going to break this down in the next slide. So the big thing to kind of think about here is that anti-honest education is extremely unpopular. According to the Ipsos poll for Parents Together, which surveyed thousands of people in August 2022, most people don't believe that these state laws banning books or making it illegal for teachers to talk about race are about the children at all. And Alex mentioned this, right? By and large, they think it's a political game that's orchestrated by elected officials who don't have our children's best interest at heart. And in fact, as you'll see in this next slide, when you start breaking down their opinions on the core tenets of honest and inclusive education, a majority of them agree. 87% of parents, right? They believe that lessons about the history of racism prepare our children to build a better future for everyone, as opposed to feeling that they're going to be harmful to them. 82% of parents feel that teachers should be able to talk about race, about gender, about sexual orientation at school, either as a way to answer the student questions about these topics or by having an age-appropriate curricula about them. And by the way, these are not an isolated finding. Now, I only just focus on the Ipsos poll, but consistent with other major nationwide polling data that I have looked at, right? Surveying, voter and parent opinion, they all are on the side of honest education. An American Libraries Association poll found that 7 in 10 Americans opposed efforts to remove books from public libraries. A CBS News and YouGov poll found that 8 in 10 people don't believe that books should be banned in schools for discussing race or criticizing history. And a National Education Association survey found that 8 in 10 voters most trust the opinions of teachers on what should be taught in schools. And so what does this all mean, right? It means that the message is clear. Parents oppose anti-honest education efforts. And not only do they reject legislative efforts to limit honest education in the classroom, they also trust their local educators, the people who are in this room, to make the right decisions on their children. And that includes the decision to teach about race, about gender, about the full history of our country. We want our schools to be a place of learning, not a political battlegrounds, and parents want schools to be a place of learning, not a political battleground. And who better to share us with this insight than Jen Cortez, co-founder of WillCo and a parent herself. So Jen, I see you just got on here, and I'm going to ask you a little couple of questions, interview style. But if you can first introduce yourselves and share a little bit about your work at WillCo and what you hear from parents about what they want their students to learn.
Sure. Thank you so much, TK. Thanks for having me. I'm such an honor to be here. So I am located in Williamson County, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm the co-founder of a parent advocacy group called WillCo. That's for Williamson County, one being united. So what we do is we advocate for students of color and try to amplify their voices in our schools. We started our work before the anti-CRT hysteria swept over the nation, but we were already boots on the ground here, so we just have been right in the middle of it. And no surprise there to all our friends of color that we're receiving this backlash. So what we do is we educate our community about the extra burdens that underrepresented populations, particularly dealing with race and ethnicity, but we care about all students of all different categories. We try to educate our population, our community about their burdens that they carry. We try to present actionable solutions to our policymakers, and then we unite community members who align with our mission. So those are kind of the 3 prongs.
I love that piece, especially about uniting around solutions. I'm actually curious about your particular perspective as a parent, and I'm curious about why is creating these spaces that support honest education important to you as a parent?
Well, it's critically important to me as a parent, and I think I'm really typical in this way. I have 4 children, and they've all been through our local public schools. 2 are already in college, 1 is in high school, but I have 1 daughter out of those 4. She's our youngest, she's 8, and so she's in 3rd grade. And she is full of wisdom beyond her years, like so many young people are these days. She sniffs out anything that's not honest instantly. You know, she's so in tune with authenticity, as our children are now, and she just deserves every opportunity to grow to her full potential, to develop, to be a leader in our generation, and she cannot do that without an honest education. And so it's critically important to me as a parent that all of our children have that opportunity. It's absurd to me that in this day and age, in the United States of America in 2022, with all of the luxuries and resources and opportunities we have as a nation, that there would be an effort to deprive our students of robust curriculum, of complex opportunities to think about different perspectives. So it's really important to me for her as a mom, for her own leadership, but also just for her humanity. It's important that she knows how to talk intelligently to other people who don't look like her, believe like her, talk like her. That's important for all of our students.
100%. And I love that bit about authenticity and how our schools have to be a place of providing them with that access instead of censoring information and preventing them from developing those skills that you talk about. Last question for you. I think there's a lot of parents in here who might want to know how to get involved with this kind of work. What encouragement do you have for them? Do you have a call to action for other parents who want to support honest education?
I do. My first word of encouragement is, you matter. Your voice matters. Your voice is so important. You probably think you're not qualified to speak into these things because you don't know everything. You don't have to know everything. You know your child, you know your community, you know your school, your principal. So start there, that you matter. And then one of the things that I've encouraged, we've done at WillCo, is we gathered friends together and we said, send in videos of why you care about honest education. Why do you care about DEI work? Why do you care about children who may not look like your child? Why do you care about their stories being told and their voices being heard? And you can send those to your school board leaders. You can send them to your state Congress people and senators, and your national, you know, your federal and your local. So just get your voice out there, gather your friends, put it on social media, engage. We desperately need all parents to engage. And I was just blown away by Ames, and wow, if the students can lead like she's leading, then I think we parents can step up a little bit and get engaged and support those students.
Thanks so much for those insights, Jen. Yeah, that was amazing. It is great, as we said, to know that there are students and parents who are uniting, not alongside, or uniting alongside educators, and all being on the same page and saying, we want an education for our students where every student is going to feel valued, heard, and seen. And this is how we do that. In that same way that Jen just gave those awesome ways that parents can get involved in the policy process. Again, all this is about policy. How do we shape policy to make sure that every child is getting the education that they need? I'm going to invite Monica to join me on the screen to share a little bit more about some of the policy recommendations you all found as educators in doing this research.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And I'm over here dancing in my seat almost because I'm so excited about the turnout and about all that's been shared so far and about what we are about to do. But we know there are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to education, but one of those misconceptions is that what a student experiences has only to do with what the teacher does in the classroom. On the contrary, student experiences do not begin and end with the lessons that a teacher teaches. They begin with policies that allow teachers to engage students in the ways that they deserve and need to be engaged. We need policies that center student voice and honest curricula. Policies that help create the condition for teachers to use their expertise to create meaningful, age-appropriate learning experiences. Those are vital. And when policies are proposed at the district level or at the state level, we need to interrogate them to determine whether they hinder children's right to information or they honor that right to information. And so as we go forward, we hope that our report can be used as a reference as you have conversations with various groups about honest education. We know teachers don't always have the time to stop and gather this, so that we hope it's really useful for you. The data, the examples from real classrooms and educators, those concrete examples of the impact on students can be used to highlight the importance of honest education and advocate for more effective student-centered policies. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to TK as he gives you some concrete steps that you can take as we move forward in advocating for honest education for all students.
Thank you so much for that, Monica. +1 to everything that you have said. And again, to make it easy for us, I synthesized 3 concrete policy recommendations that all of us can follow today. So I think there are slides here, but even if there isn't, no worries. Number 1 over here is to reject anti-honest policy and legislation. Think about education gag orders, book bans, any effort that is being made to limit our children's access to information and critical skills, especially those that help them better understand who they selves are and others are, they should be unapologetically rejected. See what's on the ballot this midterm election. Jen mentioned it. Call your legislators, join your school board meetings, and anytime you catch a whiff of anti-honest education tactics being used as a political wedge to divide us, we have to reject and speak out against them. Number 2, we want to make sure that we are supporting student-affirming practices. Now, it's not just enough to reject anti-honest education efforts. We have to go out of our way to support honest and inclusive education efforts in our local schools. Efforts like the student-affirming practices that Alex and my colleagues have voiced over today. Think about practices like a diverse curricula that covers multiple perspectives and connects students and their interests to the real-world experiences. Think about practices that are inclusive, learning materials and teaching that serve as a window for students to understand experiences that are different from them, and a mirror for students to hold up and for them to understand about themselves. And think about those practices that honor the full history of this country, ways of thinking and pedagogy that acknowledges the hard truths of our nation's past, not because we want our kids to be ashamed of our country, but because we want them to love it enough to fix what's broken. And lastly, number 3, and y'all have been doing this already, we want to make sure that we are listening to our students and our educators. Listen to those whose future is at most at stake. Students like Alex, who can articulate better than any politician on why honest education matters. Teachers like my friends Gerardo and Monica and Tracy and Chris, who speak truth through lived experience and professional expertise on how an honest education can look like. And also on that note, as an educator, I also wanted to share, why I believe in honest and inclusive education to be important. To me, teaching about race, LGBTQ+ issues, gender, class, the high highs and the low lows of our complicated history, at its core, it is a pedagogy of empathy. One that teaches our children to listen and accept one another in service of our shared humanity, our common purpose, and a respect and a curiosity for the things that are different between us. And when a child leaves the classroom grounded in a love for humanity, for other people, that is a power that can't be taken away. So let's go into our Q&As. I want to hear from everyone else.
Thank you so much for those policy recommendations, Monica and TK. I'm going to invite all of our speakers from this evening, Alex, Jen, all of our Teachers of the Year, to join me on screen as we field the question and answer portion. So I'm looking in the question and answer box and seeing people share some of their takeaways from this. Here is one question. So the question is, do you have any thoughts on the more recent attempt by the anti-honesty movement to attack social emotional learning, thinking about what TK just said around a curriculum of empathy? So how do we see social emotional learning being connected to this conversation? And I will open that to anyone who has thoughts there.
Yeah, I'm going to grab this one because it has been a big issue in Georgia. We have found that politicians decided to weaponize it because they connected one of the core competencies of SEL, which is social awareness. They connected that to DEI efforts, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the state of Georgia, we have been told in some districts this is a law, a rule for their teachers. They cannot call it SEL. They have to call it connectedness and well-being. And so a lot of it comes down to semantics. They absolutely are weaponizing it. And does that mean we stop teaching our kids how to be good people and how to look toward positive historical figures to gain insight and encouragement? Absolutely not. Good teachers, we know that this is what our kids need, and we absolutely need to take charge there. What our team has found is that because it is a lot of it around semantics, when we talk about SEL by a different name, people really understand and agree. So we've been trying to practice talking about, life skills and teaching kids how to get along with people within a diverse community. We find that just changing up those words can really help people see our perspective.
I'll add on to that, Tracy, just really quickly. As the father of a teenager whose entire high school experience has been defined by COVID and by this racial reckoning that we've been facing, I think the need for social emotional supports for our students is more pressing than it's been in recent years. Tracy's absolutely right. These attacks are not from good actors, they're not from a good place. It is attempting to establish a conspiracy theory where there is none, where really what we're looking at is how do we ensure that our students feel like they can show up as their authentic selves, advocate for the things that they want and hope for, and search for a path out of this really difficult time. So I think that is the main conversation to have. Whatever we call it, our students need our support. They're fired up. We saw Alex, they're excited to reshape this world that they're coming into and to engage it in a way that will be transformative. How do we support that, and how do we ensure that they have their needs taken care of as they move towards adulthood?
Thank you for those powerful responses. We have another question. I'm going to give this one to Jen. What should parents do immediately when they see there's a lack of representation in their kids' curriculum? Is there a different strategy that we should take depending on grade level?
That's a good question. It's at least in Williamson County, curriculum is determined at a school board level. So was the question, what should a parent do if their curriculum is not diverse enough?
Yes.
Okay, I would first go to your local school's website. Like for us, it's wcs.edu, williamsoncountyschools.edu, and that has all of our staff, our administration, our teachers, our schools, and I'm sure that all districts have something similar to that. And then I would just craft an email and reach out to either your superintendent, or you might even find who the director of the curriculum is. Oftentimes there's someone over that, and just make your voice known on that. And also, I would encourage you to connect with other parents, because we found that one email doesn't necessarily make the impact that maybe 100 emails does. So, but you can start with your voice and go from there.
Can I add on to this? Also, connect with your teacher. A lot of times we are given a curriculum that lacks diversity, and we do a lot to try to increase diversity and different perspectives in the curriculum. And I love when parents reach out to me, and if they have that inquiry or that concern, and we work together. So don't be afraid to reach out to the teacher, because the teacher could be doing wonders with what they're given to try to ensure that all students are represented.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I recall that was the case when I was in the classroom. The curriculum I was given was not at all representative of the students that I had to teach. Okay, we've got one more question, and this can go to anyone. So in your findings, do gag orders, book bans, or other such laws affect parent rights positively or negatively? A lot of the conversation is saying that parents want these things. And I know TK talked a little bit about this, but how are we finding that these policies impact parents' rights?
I'm going to reframe that question because at the end of the day, what parents and educator students want are the same. And rather than focusing on parents' rights versus students' rights, we should be aligned around what we all care about. And there's so many shared values that put us on the same page. One of the things that we as fellows are learning as we're doing this work is to hone in on those things that we all shared. I talked about this in my polling data, but this is also true of every single person that is here today. We are here because we believe that every child deserves to reach their full potential, because we believe that every child needs to feel accepted and valued, because we believe that every child should be a contributing member of society and acquire essential life and career skills. When we're able to focus on those things and connect specifically how honest education and honest pedagogy leads there, I think we all are going to make way towards ensuring that honest education happens in our classrooms.
And with that, we are going to bring our conversation to a close. So thank you to all of our panelists who shared today. And thank you to everyone for joining us for this awesome conversation about the importance of student-affirming education. I know that I got a lot from this and just listening to each and every one of you share your experiences and your perspectives. We encourage everyone to keep in mind that although there are many policy actions that harm kids that are being taken, together we can demand policy actions that support every child. Those that are with us, as we've heard, are more than those who are not. If you would like to continue this conversation and follow the work of our Voices for Honest Education Teachers of the Year, we invite you to join the Voices for Honest Education Facebook group, where you can continue to take part in this conversation. We also invite you to join the Honest Education Medium blog, where you can read weekly posts from the Teachers of the Year on what students need and on what needs to be and what is happening in our nation's classrooms. And finally, we ask that you download and share the newly released report that just got dropped in the chat right now. Share it. You will get a lot of great information. You'll hear from other educators who are also in this work and also seeking to do what is best for kids. A special thank you to Alex and Jen for affirming that parents, students, and teachers are all on one accord in that we all want every child to know that they are fully seen, fully heard, and fully valued in our nation's classrooms. And with that, we thank you everyone for joining us and wish that you have a great rest of your evening.